A few other things here that last week I posed a question right at the end. This was the old Ant Destroyer bottle that was made in New Orleans. Dick's Ant Destroyer, Finley Dix and Company, distributors, New Orleans, Louisiana. And I asked, how come that bottle has got such an unusual shape? Well, I'm going to tell you why they made poison bottles unusual shapes. This bottle was made probably in this turn of the century, not 2000, 1900 or thereabouts. It's got that old salt shaker looking thing on the top. Yeah, you sprinkle it on the ant pile or whatever ants, wherever they were. It killed the ants. But the reason they were made oddball shape, you have to remember in 1900 there were not, your electric lights were not very prevalent back then. Mostly candles, things of that nature. And you can imagine a lady reaching up in her cupboard and reaching over and thinking she's got some flour instead of ant poison. Couldn't see very well, but the biggest reason is because people did not read well back in 1900. Not like today. So, the reason they have the unusual shapes on poison bottles, all the fancy little poison, they have skulls, they have triangular shaped ones, ridges on them, all kinds of stuff. And it was to tell people when they reached up and felt it, they knew they had a hold of poison. And that's the reason for the unusual shape on the bottles. Speaking of bottles, I've got a couple of other quick bottles I'm just going to show you before we get into our fine gold recovery discussion. This was a old bottle. This thing is about 120, 130 years old. Maybe more than that, about 140 maybe. 130 anyway. This is called a Hutchinson style bottle. This was one of the original styles of why they call them pop bottles, or pop. Not only that, this says Popular Soda Water Company, SF, San Francisco. On the bottom, it says POP. But the reason they called it pop is because they had a little hook in the bottom with a little rubber seal, and it stuck up out of there. And to get these open, you went pop. And that's the way that it got this name, pop. Of course, since they were kind of carbonated drinks, about a third of it would just fizz right out. And you got to remember, these were not refrigerated. They were probably just room temperature. And when the carbonation popped out of there, they had about a third gone. Then they finished drinking it. So that's how you did. That's an interesting thing about little bottles that you may or may not have known. You bottle collectors know some of this stuff, but the average public, kind of an interesting little thing. One other thing, some of these things were unusual. These were things were usually blown in a mold, and then they applied the top. What it is, it came out of the mold with this sticking up. Then they reheated the tops, tooled these tops. So that's why they call them BIMO, blown in a mold, applied lip. Now this particular one is a Paris. I can't even read some of their pharmaceuticals. I can't read all this stuff. Two Rue, some street in Paris. This particular one was a perfume bottle. So before that, I have a couple of bottles I'm going to show you. That is an old bottle. Now you bottle collectors will know that that's about a 1700s, in the 1700s bottle, or early 1800s. This is a real crude one. Very crude. If you see all the crude stuff on the top, Very crude. This was a Dutch squat. And of course they brought all kinds of stuff in it. Wine, water, vinegar, anything that they needed in the New World. They brought it in these bottles, and they're really thick. But one thing you're going to notice, right up in the bottom, that big scar up in there, that's a scar. Glass. It's called a ponto scar. And that's where they broke the rods off when they were making the bottles and blowing the bottles. So this is, that's how one reason you can tell an old bottle is the ponto scar on the bottom. This was a little later version of it, slicked up a little bit more, but it still has that scar in the bottom. A little bit fancier bottle. This one was probably right around 1800. All right.